All right. Um, Welcome to Wednesday Night Slides number 38. Glad you all could join me tonight. We got a variety of stuff tonight, mostly recent. That's all recent stuff, with one small exception coming up a little bit later on in the program. It's been a strange month for me. Trips that should have happened that didn't happen. A place I was going to go to, then wasn't going to go to, then wound up going to anyhow. Just a crazy month. I did miss the winter rail trip. I was hoping to get to Oregon for winter rail. The first winter rail that I've missed since I started going to winter rail in 1998. Unfortunately, I've got a little bit of a breathing issue that was going to really annoy me if I had to wear a mask and haul luggage through an airport and wear the mask for 10 hours a day. Just wasn't going to happen. On the positive side, I got the NRHS convention coming up in Fullerton, California in May. And this has encouraged me to turn that into a driving trip, a combination Route 66 and rail fanning trip, driving all the way across the country. Payless rental car is going to love me when I get back with 7,000 miles on the rental, but that's the way it's going to be until I can get this breathing issue squared away permanently, which is going to take a little bit of time, but it's not incurable. It's just time consuming. Anyhow, all that said, let me share the screen here. And we're going to get started here. Today is a bit of a sad day. Well, it's more than a bit of a sad day. It's a really sad day. Rail fanning, the railroad hobby, railroad preservation lost one of its greatest friends this morning. Jim Rind passed away this morning, the editor of Trains magazine for the past 17 years. Jim passed away just a few days after his 61st birthday, after a 14-month battle with pancreatic cancer. I've known Jim for over 30 years. We first got together when he was a volunteer for the North Carolina Transportation Museum down in Spencer. And I was just an accountant, and he was a reporter for the Charlotte Observer working out of Hickory, North Carolina. He was a volunteer down there, and he recruited me to help out with some night photo stuff down at Spencer. And we became friends, and we both went on to become magazine editors, him at Trains, me at Railfan. And all these Railfan events, people would say, we'd see us together talking and having a good time. Like, weren't you guys competitors? And no, Jim and I were never competitors. We were always friends, and he's really going to be missed. And so we send out our best to his wife, Kate, and all of his family and friends. It's just really a mournful day with Jim's passing. All right, let's get into some slides here. We're going to start out with some non-train stuff this week. I actually went out and got some lighthouses, and we're going to start off over in Delaware. This is the Liston Rear Range Light. I hadn't been here in the daytime, but this was where I did my very first ever Pete Laro Lighthouse tour. We did this overnight, an overnight run down through Delmarva, the peninsula, shooting lighthouses. And one of our stops was the Liston Rear Range. It's like I said, it's my first time here in daylight. It's, as you can see, it's just a skeleton lighthouse. And it's right in a farmer's backyard, cemetery across the street. Close by, I found a muffler man. Well, they're generically called muffler men. They can be modified for a lot of uses, but this is a monster muffler man. I don't know if the muffler man manufacturers made them with the optional scary head or not. I mean, they did optional cowboy hats and things like that. But anyhow, this one here is used for the Frightland haunted house in northern Delaware. You can see how his hands are. That they were initially designed to hold a muffler. At one of the many muffler shops these giants appeared at. And this is one of the few muffler men I've found so far. Probably the only one I have found so far, where you can shoot a muffler man and a lighthouse in the same photo. I was along the Delaware River, Delaware Bay here, and looking across from Delaware into New Jersey. This is the decommissioned nuclear power plant in Lower Alloways Creek. And it's been decommissioned for quite a while, but yet the cooling tower still puts out steam. I'm not sure what its function is right now, but there is no nuclear generation going on here. Moving further downstate a little bit, we come to the Reedy Island rear range light. Once again, another skeleton light. And these lights are all for the Delaware Bay. The rear range lights are usually further inland, and then you have a lower front range light out on the water. And the idea is if the ships can look out and line the two lights up one over the other, they know they're in the channel. And then this is over on the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, the C&D Canal in Chesapeake City, Maryland. This is the Bethel Bridge Lighthouse. At one time, the C&D Canal had a dozen lighthouses along it. As the name implies, it connects the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware Bay. And here we see the lighthouse, and this is the west end of the C&D Canal. This lighthouse is actually a reproduction. There are no original C&D Canal lighthouses still standing. Back in New Jersey here, we're in the Pinelands now, over near Mays Landing, about 20 miles outside of Atlantic City. This is the old Bethlehem Loading Company facility that was used on World War I. What did Bethlehem Loading load? Well, they loaded munitions. Artillery shells, using this concoction of liquefied something mixed with or powdered something mixed with liquefied TNT. You know, what could possibly go wrong? What you're looking at here are the remains of the powerhouse that was there. This is the artesian well next to the powerhouse. This is where the water came from. What was kind of surprising is this is now all a wildlife preserve. And what surprised me was if you approach the artesian well from one direction, there are great big signs saying, don't drink the water, you're going to die if you do. Come from the other direction, there's no signs. So if you're going the wrong way on the trail and stop for a drink, you could be in trouble. It could be for spending a lot of time in the portage on. Anyhow, this is the this is the powerhouse that was there. This is the most substantial structure that's left. Yes, artesian well. This Dave Homer says artesian well. What did I say? Probably something really stupid. It's It's an artesian well. Here's some of the other remains in the same general area. A lot of foundations are back in the woods here. You got to really poke around to find them. But the powerhouse is right at the end of a driveway. Real easy to get to, fairly obvious. The town that supported Bethlehem Loading Company was called Belcoville, B-E-L-C-O, Bethlehem Loading Company, Belcoville. And that town still survives, although it doesn't really reflect the its World War I character anymore at all. It's located on the South River, and there's a boardwalk you can take. And the boardwalk has a couple of places you can walk out and view the South River. And here's the boardwalk. This is the remains of one of the loading facilities. This is the 75mm shell plant here. At one time, there were 4 separate ones of these, and each one consisted of 3 buildings. The buildings were all spaced at least 500 feet apart in case something bad happened. And they had super reinforced walls, which is why these walls are still standing. And of the, well, it would be 4 facilities, 3 buildings each. Of the 12 buildings in this one general area, only 2 buildings had walls that still remained. Some of the brickwork in the existing wall. There are other buildings that you can get to somewhat close to the trail, but when I checked the maps, it was going to be at least a 2.5 mile round trip hike to get back to those buildings. So they are being held for another day. I will eventually get to them though. The administrative buildings all still survive, but they're not anywhere near the parking lots. It takes a little bit of hiking to get to them. This is the foundation near the 75mm facility. Some of the other buildings that were there at one time. And this is a pile of dirt. But it's actually somewhat significant. When all these shells were manufactured, they had to be stored somewhere. And there were magazines scattered around the facility. And this is what's left of one of the magazines. The magazines were buildings that had wooden fences around them. Then around the wooden fences, they piled up dirt to contain any explosions. The buildings and the wooden fences are all gone. All that's left of the magazines now are just the piles of dirt that used to surround them. That's pretty much what I found at the Bethlehem Loading Company a few weeks ago. Like I said, I got a trip planned back there. Hopefully in the next few weeks before the leaves get too thick and the ticks get too thick. All right, let's get on with some train stuff now. I did see a few train things over the past month or so. The East Broad Top, this is not one I saw in the last month or so, but the East Broad Top, which is slowly coming back to life in central Pennsylvania, had its first winter spectacular since 1982. And I thought it'd be fun to look back at some of the old winter spectaculars. I went to the last five that they held. I went 5. I went from 78 to 82 to East Broad Top for the winter spectaculars held over President's Weekend each year, where they have a number of all the locomotives they could have fired up, and they ran trains through some pretty harsh weather. Here we see Mikado number 12 heading south towards Orbisonia, PA, during the spectacular. And they would run double headers and things like that. The first 2 years I went, 78 and 79, there was a lot of snow. And 78 was additionally bitter cold. Got some clarification here from Gerald on the power plants over at Lower Alloys Creek. The nuclear power plants are all currently operating. I was not aware of that. The one with the cooling tower is Hope Creek. The other two are Salem number 1 and number 2. New Jersey Electric is supplied 50% by nuclear, and the last 2 coal plants near Deepwater were recently shut down. In fact, that shut down coaling plant in Carney's Point, that's only 4 miles from my house here. And the tracks go 2 blocks away. I can hear the coal trains when they go down. The last coal train has been delivered down to the Carney's Point plant. And all the cars are still there. They're empty, but they have no place to go. The mine doesn't want them back because they have no customer to send the coal to. So they've had empty coal cars sitting for 4 weeks down there. The last coal train has gone down there. Getting back to the East Broad Top here now, the Winter Spectaculars. Here we see a double header heading south towards Orbisonia, probably 1978. Here's Mikado number 12 in front of the Orbisonia station. The first group night photo session I ever did was this one here, organized by a guy named Dan Fink from Geneseo, New York. And it was back in the old days where you'd run around with 1 flash gun and a whole bunch of flash bulbs, and over 30 or 40 seconds, they'd fire off 5 or 6 or 8 flash bulbs to light the scene up. Here's Mikado number 17 down by the coal tipple. This is all been cleared out. Since this shot was taken in 78 or 79, this has got all overgrown. They've cleared all this area out now. What they're going to do is they're going to put water tanks behind the concrete there that will supply the fire suppression system for the wooden shop buildings. The building on top of the coal tipple here has vanished, but that's going to be rebuilt as well. They're doing quite a job out there. Here's number 17. When they finish for the day, because it's so bitterly cold, and this is the only time they run in the wintertime, they have to drain the engines completely of all water. So they just open up the cocks and let the steam escape until the boiler pressure goes down to 0 and all the steam is gone. Here we see numbers 12 and 15 together on a double header during a Winter Spectacular. Back then, I didn't know what I was doing with the camera very much. So I took this shot here from the parking lot with cars in the foreground, kind of cluttered up. And of course, from 1978, when the shot was taken through most of the 80s and into the 90s, this was just a bad composition, a stinky shot that I took. So I didn't know any better. But man, as the years have progressed, all those cool cars in the foreground have gotten kind of interesting. So now it's like a little snippet of what the Winter Spectaculars once were. Across the yard from East Broad Top is the Rock Hill Trolley Museum. Back then, known as as Railways to Yesterday. As it turns out, the Winter Spectaculars just got too hard on the equipment and too hard on the men. So by 1982, 82 was the last winter one. They moved them to spring, started in 83, and then eventually moved them to the fall until they stopped running steam in 2011. Number 12, along with their Doodlebug, their gas electric M1. And here's a night photo session with both the Trolley Museum and the East Broad Top together. There's a short stretch where they share part of the Y in Orbisonia, actually in Rockville Furnace. And here's where the narrow gauge meets the standard gauge. That's a Chicago or an Elgin interurban car on the left-hand side there. Another spectacular, another doubleheader. And of course, some years there wasn't any snow at all. Here's number 12 heading south. And as I said, they ran as many engines as they could. Here's a triple header they ran one year. Although these were really hard on the engines because trying to coordinate starting and stopping 3 engines without banging the engines apart was pretty difficult. The final spectacular in '82, the one in the wintertime anyhow, it was like 60 degrees, 65 degrees that weekend. And you can see the ice is broken up on Aldwick Creek in the foreground. My parents were in Florida this weekend, and it was actually warmer on the East Broad Top than it was in Florida. So that brings us up to 2022. The current winter spectacular that just happened back in February. No steam, we're still working on steam, but for the first time since '82, the winter spectaculars are back. You received the M1, the Doodlebug, coming through the yard at Rockville Furnace. This was their Saturday event. It was the Doodlebug, maybe Friday, I don't remember. They took it up to the bridge outside of Rockville Furnace and posed it for some shots. This was Friday. Back down at the depot. And then they brought out number 12 and posed it. Like I said, there's no actual steam there right now. This is all done with commercial smoke bombs. However, next year, 2023, I can almost guarantee you there will be a winter spectacular with steam. Actual steam. In the background there, you can see the cabs of the 2 steam locomotives, the 14 and the 16 that they're currently restoring. Their diesel did most of the grunt work, pushing stuff around for the night photo session. And then we went over to the Trolley Museum and did all orange cars. That was the theme for the evening, orange cars. We have a York Railways car on the left, and then in the middle and on the right are 2 cars from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And here's the 2 Johnstown cars together. A little bit of moisture coming down, got some flare on the lens there. Next day, they ran the Doodlebug a few times up to their picnic grove, Colgate Grove and back. About 4 miles, that's their usable trackage right now. The famous overhead bridge there is now closed. The house that you see in the background is now accessed via this driveway, but the the driveway is actually opened up. Really neat photo angle here. They also ran this little dinky rail bus as part of the spectacular. We didn't ride it, but the reports that I hear, those who did, say this thing has almost no suspension. It's a pretty bumpy ride. One of the Johnstown cars over at the Trolley Museum. Caboose hop with the M1 heading north out of Rock Hill Furnace. The big fill at Runk Road has all been cleared out. That got pretty overgrown and the track was in horrible shape since they stopped running trains in 2011. They've done a remarkable job in getting this all cleaned up and the track redone. And then we had this really, really bizarre snow squall come pouring in right around lunchtime. The Trolley Museum ran their Liberty liner. This is an old Chicago North Shore Milwaukee electro liner. And when the North Shore was finished with them, they sold the 2 train sets to Philadelphia. And they were used on the Norristown High Speed line for many years. When SEPTA was done with them, 1 set was returned to the Chicago area to the Illinois Railway Museum, where it's been restored as an electro liner. And the Rock Hill Museum has the 2nd set, this one here, which will be retained as a Liberty liner. Liberty liner can only go out by itself. No other trolleys can be on the line when it runs because it draws a lot of juice. Dims the lights in Orbison. Here you see the M1 coming in with a caboose hop. And you can see the narrow gauge, the dual gauge part of the Y here. That's shared by the railroad and the Trolley Museum. Now we're back to the coal tipple again. But since this has all been cleared out and they're going to eventually use it for coal again, as well as the other purpose of storing water for their fire suppression system. On the way home, we stopped off at the Pennsylvania and Southern, which is located near Chambersburg, PA, on the old property of the old Letterkenny Army Depot. Here you see one of their patriotic locomotives, and a couple of the Army locomotives are still there. Got word that one of Amtrak's unique locomotives was on its way. This is not it. So I went over to Davis Tower near Newark, Delaware. That's Davis Tower, off in the distance on the left-hand edge there. Got a couple of trains heading geographically east, railroad north, including SEPTA. But the primary goal was this locomotive here. This is a ACS 64, the 662. Amtrak has wrapped it for a game company, video game company. And I'm not into video games, so I'm not sure of all the details, but the scheme they chose was a retro scheme from the 1980s that was used on the AEM 7s when they ran on this line. So it's pretty cool to get this vintage paint scheme going. And of course, it's got the Amtrak 50th anniversary logo on it too, to celebrate the carrier's anniversary. It was formed in 1971. And this wrap will be coming off probably in the next month or so. It's for a fairly short contract term. Headed out to Cumberland, Maryland. This is the Capital Limited coming in. Another one of Amtrak's 50th anniversary engines. This one here in what has been dubbed the Pepsi can scheme. This is coming into a station stop in Cumberland. And then while it was in the station, we buzzed ahead of it over to Mexico, not the country, but the location that's at the east end of the yard at Cumberland. That's Mexico Tower in the background, and got it leaving Cumberland. The reason I was there was to check out the 1309, the recently restored 2662 on the Western Maryland Scenic. McHugh Locomotive and Equipment chartered the railroad for the whole weekend and ran the 1309. This is their Friday dinner train trip, hors d'oeuvres actually. They did a photo run by with it at a place called Mountain View on the railroad. Massive locomotive, largest steam locomotive operating in the East. And there's the what is theoretically the Mountain View Station. It's an old bus shelter from Ridgely, West Virginia, or Cumberland, one or the other. But anyhow, apparently the railroad is going to remove this at some point. Previous management put it there. So I wanted to get a shot of the 1309 going past the Mountain View Station while I had the chance. And this is J.C. McHugh and his wife Ann. They were the hosts for the weekend. And here we see the conductors that worked the train that day. The next day found me over on the Northern Centrals out of New Freedom, Pennsylvania, for a photo charter organized by Carl Franz using their Civil War era 440 number 17, which is not really from the Civil War era. It was built about 15 years ago by Clokey Locomotive Company in Iowa. So it's a modern 440 made to look like an 1860s locomotive. Anyhow, we had a lot of decent photo run-bys on this trip. They've opened up the line. Line used to run only from New Freedom up to Hanover Junction, which is kind of famous because that's where Abraham Lincoln changed trains on his way to Gettysburg to deliver the Gettysburg Address. I hadn't been on this part of the line north of Hanover Junction in years. We used to do charters up this way back, but the line fell into disuse. It's now being reopened again, heading up towards York, Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of cool photo angles on this part of the line that I didn't know about. Along the entire railroad is this hiking trail, but the railroad and the hiking trail coexist pretty well. No real issues. This farmhouse, obviously from the 1800s or earlier, it's got a couple of modern things on the side of it, but there was one really annoying satellite dish on this side of the house too. And a bunch of us were stacked up one over the other, so that tree covered up the satellite dish. Here I just missed. You can see part of the satellite dish sticking out from behind the tree. Surprising number of really cool shots as part of the railroad. I'm just glad I did this. Highlight of the line is Howard Tunnel. It's the oldest or second oldest active railroad tunnel in the United States now. This is back down below Hanover Junction now on the line. It's been used for more than a decade now by the railroad. Attempt at a pan shot. And this is in the tastefully named town of Railroad, Pennsylvania. And that is going to bring an end to tonight's slideshow. The next one is going to be the last Wednesday in April. I think that's the 28th. I have a trip to Chicagoland between now and then. Hopefully it will have stuff to show from that trip next time around. So let me stop the recording. And
That'd be the 27th, Steve.
27th. Okay, thank you, Doug. Let me stop the recording.